The Four of Swords in Joe Bandel's Oak Tarot of Love and Romance presents a striking visual paradox. Four glowing swords forming a protective square around a man reaching out in vulnerability, while a woman listens with a heavy mix of compassion and distance. This card explores the concept of seductive pain and the radical, sometimes desperate honesty used to draw a partner back after a mental collision. It represents that precarious bridge between the mental energy of the sword suit and the raw emotional energy of the heart. We're moving beyond the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith interpretation of the Four of Swords as mere rest or convalescence and entering the Oak Matrix, where this card becomes a laboratory for emotional truth-telling.
It's a massive departure from the quiet knight on a tomb we usually see. In Bandel's deck, the Four of Swords is deeply active, even in its stillness. The seductive pain mentioned in the guidebook isn't about being manipulative in the toxic sense, though it carries that risk. It's about the strategic use of one's own suffering as a bridge. Think about the sequence of the swords in this deck. We start with the ace, which shatters the rose-colored glasses of infatuation with the cold light of reality. Then the 2 is that uncomfortable mirror where you see yourself through your partner's eyes. The 3 is the get real moment of mental collision. By the time we hit the 4, the mind is exhausted from the conflict and it realizes that logic won't win the partner back. Only the heart can do that. So the man in the card stops fighting with his head and starts bleeding with his heart, hoping that his honesty will act as a magnetic pull.
That term seductive pain is fascinating because it suggests a sort of power dynamic. If I share my pain with you, I am essentially asking you to hold it, which can be a way of reclaiming your attention. The card description says the partner shares their suffering in hopes of winning the other back. This feels like a high-stakes emotional gamble. In a psychological sense, isn't there a danger of this becoming a form of emotional hostage-taking? If the woman in the card is listening with distance, it suggests she might be wary of that very thing.
That's exactly the tension Bandel is highlighting. The woman's distance is her boundary. She is showing compassion, but she isn't jumping into the protective square with him yet. This square formed by the 4 glowing swords represents a sanctuary, but it's also a boundary. In the Oak Matrix, Joe Bandel argues that the mind loves boundaries and definitions. The swords are mental energy. They provide the structure, the 4 walls, that allows the emotional energy to be expressed safely. Without those swords, that pain would just be a chaotic flood. With them, it becomes a structured honesty. The seductive part is the hope that by showing the full extent of the wound, you make it impossible for the other person to look away. It's an attempt to move from the platonic or mental love of the sword suit into the emotional love of the cup suit.
It sounds like a transition phase. Bandel notes that the minor arcana in his deck are divided into types of love: wands for spiritual, swords for mental, cups for emotional, and pentacles for physical. If the Four of Swords is the shift from mental to emotional, it's the moment you realize that winning the argument, the work of the Three of Swords, didn't actually save the relationship. In fact, it might have broken it. So you have to pivot. You have to use the very pain caused by that mental collision to prove that the connection is still alive. But let's talk about that oak tree in the background. It's the anchor of the entire deck. How does the tree change the meaning of this specific vulnerability?
The oak tree represents grounded reality and endurance. In Bandel's organic Gnosticism philosophy, the oak is the standard of truth. It stays firm while the leaves and the light are always shifting. By placing the oak tree behind this vulnerable man, Bandel is saying that this pain is grounded in something real. It's not a performance or a flight of fancy. The vulnerability is anchored in the structural integrity of the relationship itself. The tree provides the sanctuary where this work can happen. It suggests that while the man's plea is painful, it's also necessary for the long-term survival of the connection. It's the refuge of love where you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be real.
But for the woman listening, the experience is described as a mix of compassion and distance. That's a very specific emotional cocktail. Why the distance? If the man is being so honestly vulnerable, wouldn't the loving response be to close that gap immediately?
Not necessarily in the Oak Matrix. Remember, Bandel emphasizes that duality is a loving embrace of opposites, not a merging into a single blob. The distance is crucial because it allows the woman to remain herself while she witnesses his pain. If she loses her distance, she loses her ability to be the clear mirror that the sword suit requires. She has to see him as a separate human being, not just an extension of her own needs or guilt. This reflects a psychological concept often discussed in modern relationship therapy, the difference between empathy and emotional contagion. If she just catches his pain, they both drown. If she maintains that respectful distance, she can hold the space for his honesty to actually land. It's the difference between a performance of love and a mechanic of the soul.
I'm looking at the gendered experiences Bandel details for this card. He says for the male experience, there's an urge to share pain openly to reconnect. For the female, it's that mix of compassion and distance. This seems to invert a lot of traditional stereotypes, where men are seen as the ones withholding emotion and women are the ones pleading for it. Here, the man is the one reaching out in pain. Why do you think Bandel framed it this way?
It goes back to his work on the Prince of Wands and the Three of Swords. In those cards, the masculine figure is often struggling with his own ego defenses, the rugged protector who can't articulate his needs. By the Four of Swords, that shell has cracked. The pain he's sharing is the realization that his intellectual competence or his defensive armor isn't enough to sustain the bond. He is essentially surrendering his ego. For the woman, her experience of resolve mixed with sadness comes from the heavy lifting of disillusionment. She's seen the rose-colored glasses shatter, and now she has to decide if she can love the real wounded person in front of her. Her distance is the time she needs to process that shift.
It's a very get real card. It's not about the honeymoon phase or the emotional highs. It's about the work required to keep the circuit of the relationship flowing. Bandel describes the relationship as a laboratory for ego deconstruction. If the man uses his pain to try and seduce her back, he's essentially saying, "Look at what you've done to me," or "Look at how much I need you." Psychologically, that can be a form of manipulation called self-victimization to achieve visibility. Is the Four of Swords warning us about this, or is it encouraging it?
It's doing both. It's an invitation to be gentle with both hearts, as the guidebook says. It acknowledges that the impulse to use pain as a hook is a natural human reaction to the fear of loss. But because it's a swords card, it demands honesty. If the pain is seductive but fake, the oak tree won't support it. The glowing swords, the light of consciousness, will eventually reveal the manipulation. The card is saying, yes, use your honesty to draw them closer, but make sure it's the truth of who you are, not just a tactic to win an argument. It's a transition from duality as conflict to duality as a loving embrace. You aren't fighting each other with words anymore. You are sharing the consequences of the words that were already spoken.
Color palette, cool silvers, soft blues, and warm earth tones really underscores this. The silvers and blues are the mind, the earth tones are the oak and the body. It looks like a room where a fever has finally broken. The mental exhaustion of the traditional Four of Swords is still there, but it's been repurposed. Instead of just sleeping to recover, you're resting in the truth of your own vulnerability. It's a strategic retreat from the battle of the Three of Swords into the sanctuary of the Four.
Exactly, and that square of swords is vital. In sacred geometry, the number 4 represents stability and foundation. It's the 4 walls of the relationship. The man is inside that square, which means he is protected by the very structure of the commitment they've built. He can afford to be that vulnerable because he's within the sanctuary of the oak matrix. He isn't reaching out into a void, he's reaching out within a container. This card is a reminder that sometimes the most productive thing you can do for a relationship is to stop trying to fix things with logic and just let the other person see your struggle. It's about letting the current flow as it will.
It really highlights that soulmate cycle Bandel talks about. This idea that a partner isn't just someone who makes you feel good, but someone who acts as a sparring partner for the mind and a witness for the soul. The Four of Swords is that moment where you stop sparring and just let them witness. It's a high-frequency exchange because it requires so much trust to show that level of emotional honesty without the guarantee that the other person will close the distance. You have to be okay with their distance while you share your plea.
And that is why the card is categorized under platonic or mental love. It's still about the mind realizing its own limits. It's the mind saying, I can't think my way out of this heartbreak, so I will simply describe the heartbreak as clearly as I can. It's the Lord of Rest from strife, as the Golden Dawn would call it. But the rest isn't passive. It's the rest that comes from surrendering the need to be right. It's a very courageous card because it's the moment you decide that the truth of who you are is more important than the comfort of the performance you are putting on.
The Four of Swords ultimately teaches us that vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness, but a structural requirement for deep connection. By using seductive pain and radical honesty, we create a sanctuary where the ego can finally rest, allowing the relationship to move from mental conflict toward genuine emotional intimacy. It's an invitation to trust that the oak tree of your foundation can handle the weight of your most vulnerable plea. If you're navigating an uncomfortable phase in your own partnership, share this episode with someone who might need to hear that a pause and a little honesty might be the bridge they're looking for.